So what have you been up to lately?
Oh, just working, working on a few things. Yeah, just my regular work. I've been developing, just waiting I'm kind of waiting on a sort of trademark patent for just some other stuff, and it has to do with more software-based. But I'm also, but other than that, I'm working on creatively. I'm still doing creative things. I've been writing for a magazine that I write for. I write for Ubiquitous magazine. I'm a contributing writer. So I've been doing a few interviews with different creative people, different bases. It's sort of a lifestyle fashion type of magazine. So I've been, doing that. I've been working on my own magazine, the development of Zen Bitch, and running a couple of little businesses. I started working on some film things with a friend of mine. So pushing more for production. I kind of feel like, the future, there's so many things that you can do nowadays, and I think that inevitably, everybody is going to be doing a lot of different things. I think you have a passion, you should just go for it, whatever it is. And
yeah.
I think you can do it nowadays.
Definitely. Well, that's interesting. You've got a film in the beginning stages, huh?
Well, it's not necessarily that. I was working on costumes with a friend of mine. She does costumes, and I've found it fascinating because it's sort of based upon, character-driven costumes. The costumes essentially tell the story of the film, but also now moving more into the production end of film, of trying to get certain films produced. So that's what it's kind of pulling me into, because there are some really great scripts and people have some amazing stories to tell. And after being around it for a while, I was like, well, why not try to get these ideas to the right people, and hopefully they'll have the right platforms and showcases for these ideas to see the light of day. So, yeah, that's kind of where I've been drawn. And I think that probably comes from just having a lot of friends doing different things, and you just try to help or participate or chip in if you can, with whatever your expertise may be.
Right. Well, it's good that you have those creative things going on, because I know the political climate isn't the best right now, and I think we agree quite a bit on things politically. So yeah, it's pretty nuts right now, I'd say.
We're at a real impasse,
We are. We really are.
As a society, as different cultures, once everything sort of globalism came into effect, that's sort of where everything started to get a little, the tremors started to happen, and it started to really challenge, I think, a lot of our philosophy, our ethics, our morals, all of it. And that's kind of where we are.
Right, exactly. Did you ever have conversations with Prince back in the day about society and the direction that was headed, or the direction that was in at the time? And
we did. He and I actually did have conversations like that, because we were pretty apocalyptic, as two people could be. And I think that basically was, if you look essentially with our religious upbringing, they were both pretty apocalyptic. He was Seventh-day Adventist. I was Jehovah's Witness. So there is always this intellectual sort of cold truth or reality that just sort of hovers over you as a child, that this system is a mess. from the get. You're kind of told that. And,
right.
You've got to figure out how to be in it but not of it and all that kind of stuff. So I feel there were many parallels. And, yes, he and I did speak about things with disdain and sort of a lot of, not at length. I mean, it wasn't like it took up much of our time, where I think he had the best outlet was usually in his music.
Right.
You could see that he had processed, he was processing his observations and had some commentary on it. And I think his earlier works, and maybe all of his works, you can always find a hint of some kind of political or commentary on what was happening culturally at that time. Even if you go back to Ronnie Talk to Russia or Sexuality, those kind of things, I think when he moved into that arena with Controversy and, the Dirty Mind album, I think he really started to reach into a broader scope of it.
Right.
All the Critics Love You in New York spoke a lot about critics and people having much to say,
right.
And always just being a critic so it's kind of, I think we did. We definitely had those conversations.
Huh.
I mean, when he was getting, pummeled by Tipper Gore's Moral Majority and all of that kind of stuff, we definitely were not pleased with that. And, as young people, we had our viewpoint, which was a little bit more of our ethics were a little more open and broader about, acceptance and tolerance. So it was kind of interesting that, and also we were really spearheading a real clear picture of the sexuality we were speaking on. It wasn't like we were pussyfooting around it. We were very clear.
Right. Exactly. It's interesting you should mention those early albums, because I'm going to be at the academic conference at the University of Minnesota in April, and I'm working on a paper on eschatology in 1999 and Purple Rain.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, so
that sounds great.
I think that's pretty interesting that you mentioned that you were both sort of, apocalyptic minded back in those days, because, I definitely see that in those two albums especially. So I'll be talking about several of the songs from those albums, and also a few of the songs from Around the World in a Day, too.
Right.
Have that, the end of days theme to them, so it should be interesting.
Yeah, it was the end of days played, I think, a very strong social background palette for him. I think it was, there was always that.
Right. Spearheading off of that, did you guys talk a lot about faith and religion and God and all that?
Yeah, I guess we talked about God a lot on many levels, But we also spoke about the fact that there is a fine line about where your powers are coming from, which God. Those things were kind of brought up a lot. Definitely dark and light. The forces of good and evil were, like I say, I think they were a strong fabric of who and everything that we were doing.
Right, because I remember Love Sexy, which is a very spiritual album. You have this whole, battle between Love Sexy, which represents, God and being in love with God, and then Spooky Electric, which was the kind of evil force. That kind of So, like you said, the light and the dark.
Yeah, and I think that there were always extremes, and things were always very black and white, even though, you know, the rest of pop music was kind of operating within the gray. There would be a safe place to, you know, to expose one's sexuality, like Madonna would do it her way, but it was gray compared to Vanity 6. You know, it was so if you look at it, there was just this fine line, and I think it also really differentiated him, Prince, from like the Michael Jacksons and all of that, because he was mixing religion with this whole music thing. And I think that scared a lot of people in those days. They were afraid when they'd see a cross hanging and you're naked in your shower. Those kind of evocative images scared the hell out of everybody. Yeah. Right.
I've always found it fascinating the way that he would blend sexuality and spirituality as if the two, you know, weren't mutually exclusive, which I believe they aren't. I believe they're both part of the human experience.
Well, I think that he was adopting something that you'd only seen in the rock world, like Black Sabbath or Alice Cooper. So he basically took it and brought it into this, and it was this, you know, black guy doing it. And that hadn't really been done so much because he really, you know, was like, people couldn't understand that. It's not that it wasn't being done. It was just, you'd see it in the rock world, these very strong sexual archetypes. And comic books, you would see it too, the women of the characters. And so Prince kind of brought that to life and carved out his own niche. Because Michael Jackson was amazing, but I don't think he was sexy. That was not his appeal. It wasn't sexy. Prince brought in, I'm a sexy man, and I'm a sexy something. I could be anything you want me to be, you know, in your head. And so I really like that he played with a lot of the mind of his fans, because I think he didn't just get them with the imagery, he got them in their minds. Like he had these full-on affairs with his fans, and they will walk away, and some of them still believe they've have these deep connections, and I'm not going to say that they didn't have it, because it wasn't, he really did get into their heads. He was there in their lives.
Right. Well, it's interesting. It's interesting in my case, I was born 3 months early and suffered brain damage at birth. So I ended up with cerebral palsy, and I'm in a wheelchair. But God blessed me with a great mind, I would say. Not to sound
how amazing.
Not to sound conceited or anything like that, but I was blessed with a strong mind and a strong heart. So I'm very grateful for that. And Prince was a big part of my life and still is, as far as spirituality goes, as far as, you know, sexuality goes. I mean, he was a teacher and kind of a guru, you know, all throughout my life in those domains. And yeah, I definitely feel like he's a big part of my mind and also my heart. His music meant a lot. It really does still mean a lot to me personally. And I know a lot of fans were affected, like you say. He appealed to their minds in a way that few other artists, I think, have been able to do throughout their careers. And it's just really interesting and fascinating and humbling to, you know, to think that we existed at the same time that he did. So
I know.
It's a real blessing.
It is, and it's also quite sad
Right.
with his loss because
Right.
this is it. I don't think the fans. Everyone's still relatively young. The fans were not ready to let that go yet,
Right.
because they still have some things to do here left on this earth. Many do, and he'd been with them through so many things individually. And I mean, and when you put your head around that, we can laugh it off, but he really did find the people who sometimes were shy or broken, or people who no one would pay attention to, or the eccentric or the eclectic, and he kind of gave them a voice, and he gave them like a safe harbor to go to. And he went with them through these different peaks and valleys of their lives. And so that's why it has been so heartbreaking on a certain level, his death, because the grieving that I've seen has been, it's sort of like how Princess Diana was the same for many, many people as well. I mean, you remember when you found them, you remember what they mean to you. But with Prince, I think it was the people were not ready for this, and this is not the way they wanted to see him go. And many of them would say they would have rather been gone before witnessing him leaving. I've heard some say that,
Right. I know for me personally, in my mind, I had always thought, gee, I hope by the time Prince leaves us that I would have somebody in my life, a partner, a wife, or a girlfriend, or somebody that I could lean on through it. And unfortunately, I don't. But I've been able to get through it. But I still think of him almost every day, and I'm surrounded by his image. I've got a lot of magazine covers and tributes and stuff in my room, and he's always in my thoughts. He's always nearby, and it's a comfort.
Well, I know was a source of tremendous comfort for a lot of people, and I'm being a little intellectual here, but only because I wasn't around him the last years of his life for many years. But when I look at it, I kind of see that in a very odd, peculiar way, his life trajectory and how the span of it looks as though towards the last 10-something years of his life, he pretty much was in mentor mode anyway. And, mentors are not always your friends. Like, some people are like, oh, do you have a mentor? Yes, I've had mentors. I don't know the ins and outs of their personal aspects of their lives. So what I'm saying is that he really did take on that whole role of the guru, the mentor, and I think he really was finding his place within it and understanding by going online a little and chatting with people, because it started to make me laugh a little, because in the early days he would get some mail and we'd go through it until we got a really bad batch of mail with some private things being sent. But before that, he would call people and hang up on them or do silly things. But I think he understood I think he always knew how the magnanimity, I don't know if that's a word, but how important he was to many people. But I think it feels like I feel he may have started to embrace that and was moving into a direction to console, nurture, strengthen people. Some of the words in his later albums were more about preparation and trying to be strong and having a more loving aspect is quite beautiful. I think it says a lot to me about his relationship with his fans, more or less, towards the end of his years. I think they were really the only ones who were there for him. This is why I think that piano show was so incredible, because it was like here he was surrendering himself to just you guys and him. And for me, that is the top. That's the top. That is such a brilliant thing. It's like serendipitous how that happened, as sad as it was. It is so symbolic to me of who was there and who he adored, and I think it was his fans. I mean, we can go into the girls of this, the bands of this. He was just sort of like this naked being, and because he had these Sanskrit symbols behind him, too, during those shows, like the beginning of the Vedas, like the beginning, and there he was, just pure, and I really found it to be, it's kind of chilling, actually. It's so chilling to me, and it haunts me a little bit, but it was so pure, the essence. And I think that's the complete circle that the fans have to really embrace that, because I think it was a gift to his fan base. That was a gift that people got. That was the gift. It really wasn't the record. It was that.
Right. And I've talked about the whole full circle thing with other fans, and we agree. You know, it's kind of chilling, like you say, how he went back to the Afro, you know, in the last few years, and it kind of called back, you know, the very beginning of his career, and in the end, it was just him and a piano and the audience, and like you say, that's the top, the zenith of you know, what he could do. And
well, yes, because he'd been speaking so much, you know, you said, like, the spirituality. There, as I said in our earlier youth, we were a little bit more apocalyptic. But what's so beautiful about his career is that he actually went to the Genesis again. And that's what's so beautiful to me. It's like, don't be afraid. I'm not, you know what I mean? There was no fear. There was this tremendous calm, like going into a swimming pool. And, you know, even if he was terrified, I mean, Prince never wanted anybody, he would never let anybody know. I mean, he'd show out a little bit. He didn't want to go skydiving, but I was kind of crazy, always crazy with him. But for me, the genesis of who he was as his spirit and his energy, that was a present to everybody, and I think we really got to see that. I hope over the years that that's the one thing that people remember. I think it's brilliant that he did the piano and microphone show, because a few years before, in 2011 or something, I think I got into it with Alan Leeds online about something. He was criticizing Prince on Saturday Night Live or something. I don't know, or a new album, and I was like, just leave him alone. Like, you know, let him do his thing and grow, because I always felt that, and I had said, I don't care about the bands, and I never did. I was fine tooling around Prince's house and him just fooling around on his piano. Seriously. Yep. And if people could have seen that, barefoot at the piano, just sitting there, maybe in his underwear, or nothing at all. I mean, just to live that and to know he is this instrument of music. It's passing through him. That's, if I had to say how I was always reminded of God, it was because of some of his works that he did. And I've often said, you know, some people have gone on, oh, you were a muse, or this one was a muse, or this one wasn't. Sometimes I've often thought that we were just casted into the role that came along and in a person's life, and I think those little songs were babies that had to find a way, because it went beyond me or who inspired this song. It went beyond that. Those songs had to find you guys. They had to find fans, and they had to change lives or impact them. And see, for me, on a metaphysical level, that's far more important than, because, but his knowing that he trusted a higher power so much, and his creativity would make all of us walk around and go into studios and think we could do the same thing and stay up all night and have the same things happening. But it wasn't really like that. There was some kind of weird connection. He put in the time. He had a relationship with the higher spirit. And I believe that's why it worked. You know,
Right.
there just was a tremendous amount of trust that he had with God when he created his songs and his faith. And for me, nobody is saying that, because creativity is your direct connection with the Supreme. Your creativity, every time you paint, whatever, that's you. That's a whole new relationship. It's not your wife, it's not your girlfriend, it's not your sister, it's not your kids.
Right. Right. I agree. And to me, I don't know, I've always...
Tina had it as well. Tina Marie had it as well.
Yeah.
The only difference with Tina is she was vocal about this love with her mentor, who was Christ. She spoke a lot, and it was in her home. You can feel it. It's very funny. Both of them I saw again after some period of time, and you know, shortly after I'd seen them, they passed away. There's something very similar in their personalities and presence of being around those times. I won't really elaborate, but of the two people that I've seen, a male, the animus and the anima of two different, a male and a female, who came onto this earth, who loved, I mean, their passion was their music. I don't think I've ever met any other two people who, other than Tina and Prince. I mean, they would have been fine on islands just sitting there. They literally were the type of people who went on stage because they felt they needed to share with you what they had. It wasn't like, I need to be famous. That's a trip. I've met people who were different. Okay, Ruichi Sakamoto is another one. Connected. There's a connection, a fiber. It transcends things. So, yeah, I've been blessed to meet those people. And, yeah, who've done some remarkable things. Remarkable.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, they brought notes and harmonies and chord structures and composites and juxtapositions to get you thinking. And they changed, their dynamic changed a room. Anybody who can do that with whatever their art form is or their embodiment as a person, that's power. And, you know, yeah, everybody can go through their Machiavellian period or whatever. The interesting thing is, when I was in their presence to see their creation process, there was a tremendous amount of trust for being in the moment and receiving what was at hand. Sometimes it would be silly, sometimes it would be goofy, but to really go with it. And then there was this also continuum of completion to finish it. There was something about these people always had to figure out how to finish it. Wasn't the kid who left it all over the toys in the room. They would stay maybe for days, but they'd come back and try to finish it, the puzzle.
Right.